Step away from my door, Charlotte. That key doesn't work here anymore. She didn't flinch, just kept her hand hovering near my doorknob like she had some divine right to twist it. The metal glinted in the morning sun, dangling from her smug fingers. An HOA-issued master key, as if my home was just another rental property in her little kingdom. You're violating Article 3, Section 5, refusing a wellness check during occupancy uncertainty, she said, with that hollow official tone she used, like armor. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. You sure about that? I flicked my phone screen toward her. Because? That motion sensor over your head? Still connected to my server, and it shows you tried this yesterday at 2:13 a.m. Her face twitched, just for a second, but I saw it. I'm Evelyn Carter, 47, retired firefighter, widow, mother of a son who wears a badge and carries himself like his father. Calm, sharp, unbending when it counts. This house? My parents built it with sweat and cinder blocks in 1978. After Dad passed, Mom planted that pine tree out front, said it would watch over us. She was right. I buried her ashes beneath it last fall. This place isn't just home, it's legacy. And no HOA fine or key-wielding tyrant is going to erase that. Where are y'all watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you've ever had to stand your ground against power-hungry neighbors, you're gonna want to see how this ends. Things only get worse from here. Charlotte stepped back like she'd just remembered I wasn't someone easily intimidated. There's a process, you know. Non-compliance can get you fined. You're not above the bylaws just because your son's a cop. Didn't say I was above them, but I'm damn sure not beneath you. I smiled, the way you smile when you've got a loaded deck and the other player doesn't even know they're being watched. Truth is, this wasn't the first time she tried something like this. Last week it was a notice about my inconsistent sidewalk edging. Before that, a claim about excess lighting from front porch fixtures. Charlotte Baines had been HOA president for 2 years, and every month she got a little bolder, a little more invasive, and a hell of a lot more creative with her violations. I held the door half closed with my boot. Charlotte, what exactly is it you think you're trying to do? She held up her clipboard like a sword. You failed to report an overnight occupant. That's grounds for a level 2 infraction and... My son, I cut in, he lives here now. After 3 years working patrol out of District 8, he's staying with me for a while, which makes your claim invalid and your key illegal. She stared at me like I'd spoken Latin. You think you own this neighborhood, I said, but the difference between owning a position and owning power is that power pushes back. She lowered her hand slowly. Something told me she wasn't used to that. Expect a follow-up letter, she snapped, heels clicking as she turned down the porch. I shut the door and stood in the silence, letting it settle like dust. Mason walked in from the hallway, sipping his coffee like he'd heard every word. You handled that better than I would have. Yeah, I said. Let's see how long it takes her to forget you carry a badge. Not long, he said, but long enough for her to make a mistake. Out front, the wind rustled through Mom's pine. I looked at it and smiled, not because things were calm, but because I knew what was coming. They came for me with keys. They didn't know I kept the locks. Mason's boots thudded lightly against the hallway floor as he headed out for his shift. Call me if she shows up again, he said, pausing at the door with a glance back, and keep that camera running. I nodded, one hand resting on the counter near my phone. The footage from yesterday had already been backed up in 3 places. After he left, I walked out to the porch. A folded paper was rubber banded to the iron mailbox. Another letter from the HOA. I opened it with the practiced disinterest of someone who'd read too many of these. But this one? This one was bolder. Violation 147C. Excess debris in visible yard area. Property does not meet HOA landscape aesthetics. Daily fine $75.00. Excess debris? The only thing in my yard was the pine tree, a bird bath, and a single lawn chair with sun-bleached arms. The same setup it had had for years. I held the paper closer, noticing a line in small print at the bottom. Note, photos have been submitted to the HOA archives. I looked around, slowly, carefully. Then my eyes lifted to the new fixture Charlotte had ordered mounted on the telephone pole last month. A community safety light that had a small, black lens tucked beneath the bulb. I muttered, unbelievable, then went back inside and wrote it down in the spiral-bound notebook I kept in the kitchen drawer. Date, time, violation code, suspected surveillance location. Mason had told me once, "Write it all down, Mom. No one's going to believe your word alone anymore." Back in '97, when I was still working the fire station, we used to train for structural collapse. Not just buildings, but systems. I'd learned early, systems don't fall fast. They crack quietly, bit by bit, before anyone notices. That was Charlotte's game. Not explosive control, slow erosion, sandpaper over steel, one letter, one fine, one neighbor whispering about your non-conformity. I poured coffee into the chipped mug my husband left behind, the one that said, "Best dad ever." He used to laugh and say it was false advertising. I kept it out of spite now because he wasn't here to fight this with me. He'd hated the HOA. From day one, said it was a playground for people who'd failed at real control and settled for punishing mailboxes and mismatched door paint. He was right. By mid-afternoon, I had 2 more letters. One was a duplicate. The other accused me of allowing unauthorized structural modifications. I blinked at that one, trying to make sense of it. I walked out to the side of the house and stared at the new gutter pipe I'd installed last fall after the last storm tore the original loose. I'd painted it the same color as the trim. It was clean, neat, hidden. And apparently it was grounds for punishment now. I called the HOA office. A robotic voice answered and routed me to voicemail. "This is Evelyn Carter, 204 Pine Hollow. I'm requesting photographic proof of alleged infractions listed in violation 147C and 231A. I expect to see timestamps and citation basis per Community Guidelines Section 14.2. Also, I am formally disputing the charges. You'll receive it in writing." Click. I wrote the same thing out in pen, no printer today, I wanted it handwritten, and placed it in an envelope addressed to Charlotte Baines, HOA president. Walking it down to the drop box, I passed a few of the neighbors. Most avoided eye contact. One, an older woman with a big sun hat and 2 dachshunds, paused as if to speak, then turned back to her gate. They were watching all right, just not saying much. When I returned home, the porch light flicked on even though it wasn't dusk. Motion sensor again. I stared into the lens and said aloud, "Hope you're enjoying the show." Inside, I flipped through the HOA manual, scanning clauses with a highlighter. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd written reports under pressure, learned to read building codes, and knew how people twist language to corner you. And Charlotte? She was twisting every word she could find. The HOA manual lay half open on my dining table, next to my highlighter and a half-drunk glass of tap water. I'd spent the last hour dissecting Section 14.2 like it was evidence in an arson case, and honestly, it might as well have been. Mason had texted to check in. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a photo of the surveillance light out front, captioned, "Still starring in their movie." I didn't bother telling him how off balance I felt, because I wasn't afraid, just cornered. And when you're cornered, you don't flinch, you study the walls and look for the cracks. That's when I heard it, a knock at the front door. Not hard, not urgent, just hesitant. I opened it, and standing there like he wished he were anywhere else was Derek Mallory, HOA vice president. Clipboard in hand, shirt tucked too tight, and a bead of sweat cutting down his temple like a slow apology. "Evelyn," he said, shifting his weight, "didn't mean to bother." "You already are," I replied. "What's the clipboard say this time?" He winced slightly. "It's just the scheduled inspection record." Charlotte said to verify yard violations personally. I stepped aside without a word, holding the door open wide. He didn't move. "You want to inspect my lawn, Derek, or are we going to stand here pretending this is normal?" He stepped inside like he was crossing a line he didn't want to admit existed. His eyes didn't meet mine. Instead, they darted to the floor, the baseboards, the rug edges, anywhere but the framed photo of my husband on the shelf. The photo where he's standing in front of this very house with soot-stained gear and a grin like the world hadn't touched him yet. "Didn't know you still had that," Derek muttered, gesturing toward it. "Still his house," I said. He nodded, slow, silent. I watched his hand as he fumbled with the clipboard. It shook. Just a little. But it was there. Like nerves trying to surface through his fingertips. "Derek," I said, voice low. "Why'd you really come here?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step toward the living room window and peeked through the curtain like he was afraid someone might be watching. "Do you ever feel like you're doing something you don't believe in?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Almost daily," I said, but I stop before I follow through. He swallowed hard and finally turned to face me. "She's pushing this harder than normal. Something about your property's status. Legacy clause? I don't know where she even got the wording." I blinked. That clause hadn't come up in years. It was buried in the original homeowner agreement, an outdated provision that gave certain families protections against overreach. She said, "It's a loophole, wants to close it." Quietly, I exhaled slowly, more a hiss than a breath. "And you?" He looked down at the clipboard again, then tucked it under his arm like he couldn't stand holding it. "I'm tired," he said. "I didn't sign up for whatever this is. The way she talks about you behind closed doors, like you're an infestation." That word stuck. I leaned against the archway. "So you're her enforcer now, is that it?" "No," he said, sharp this time. I guess I'm waking up late." His hands shook again, this time worse. He tried to tuck them in his pockets, but I saw it. "You still have access to internal meeting records?" I asked. He didn't answer, just gave a quick, almost invisible nod. "You ever want to hand one of those over?" I added. "I'll be ready." He stepped toward the door without another word. "Derek?" He paused. "You're the only one who knocked." He left without replying, but the tension in his shoulders said enough. I stood there for a while after he left, the room still heavy with what wasn't said. Charlotte's plans were deeper than I thought, digging into the old charters, trying to erase history with updated PDFs and confident lies. I walked outside and stood under the pine tree, tracing my fingers along the bark where Dad carved our initials back in '85. My mother used to say trees listen better than people. Maybe that's why I talk to it more than my neighbors lately. Inside, I made a new entry in the notebook. Derek M., conflicted, might crack. Mentioned legacy clause, watch. I clicked the pen shut and let it sit on the table. Let her come again. I was done playing polite. If you've ever dealt with neighbors who think power gives them permission, you know this is just the beginning. Tell me where you're watching from and stick around, 'cause Charlotte's about to learn exactly how deep my roots go. The next morning started like any other. Quiet, fog lifting off the street, porch light blinking from motion it probably didn't detect. But inside, the air felt heavier. Derek's warning wasn't something I could shake off. Legacy clause, Charlotte trying to bury it. And now, I had to dig. I grabbed my second oldest laptop from the hall closet, an old Lenovo with a crack down the screen hinge. It still booted, slow as molasses, but it had files my newer one didn't. When my husband passed, I scanned every document from the HOA charter to Mom's original deed and stored backups in 3 places. This was one of them. Coffee brewing, pine tree swaying just outside the window. I opened the folder marked HOA legal nonsense. Half the documents were unreadable scans, but after 45 minutes and 2 mugs of caffeine, I found it. Article 16, Historical Protections for Founding Properties, highlighted in red by my past self. It stated plainly that homes built by original landowners like mine were exempt from cosmetic ordinance revisions post-2002 unless structural safety was in question. That meant the new gutter citation, worthless. The porch light notice, toothless. Even the supposed aesthetic standards they'd been sending me weekly, irrelevant. I leaned back, let out a long breath, and said out loud, "Well, hell, she's really hoping no one reads." A knock at the door startled me, but not enough to spill my coffee. This one wasn't Derek. It was firmer, rhythmic. I opened it to find Frances from 3 doors down, holding her gardening gloves in one hand and a copy of the latest HOA newsletter in the other. She didn't smile. "They said you got flagged again. For verbal hostility." I blinked. "That's not a rule." "Doesn't matter, she's inventing them now." Frances looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. "I heard them. Charlotte and Gary, they were talking about removing your voting rights at the next meeting." I let that sink in. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated. Her eyes darted around like someone might be watching, like someone was always watching. Once inside, she hovered by the door. "You can sit," I said gently. She didn't. I know you and my husband didn't always get along, I offered, trying to break the tension. Elle had a big voice, she said. I don't do well with big voices. There. I pointed at the printout of Article 16 on the table. They're trying to erase this, Derek told me. Her face twitched slightly at the name. You're still on the garden subcommittee, right? She nodded slowly. Do you attend closed board meetings? Frances looked away, lips tightening. Sometimes. I don't vote. But you listen. Silence. Then, Charlotte keeps saying you're a liability, that your house undermines neighborhood cohesion. She used that exact phrase. Gary said you're emotionally unstable. Derek didn't speak. That told me everything I needed to know. Derek was trying to stay neutral. Frances was tipping. You ever feel like you were pushed onto a stage you didn't ask for? I asked. She glanced at me. Every time she makes me deliver those newsletters. I reached into my drawer, pulled out a spare copy of the Legacy Clause and handed it to her. Keep that. Read it. If she tries to get you to sign anything, stall. Say you're thinking about it. Say your knees hurt. I don't care. She clutched it like it was something alive. What are you going to do? First, I said, I'm going to get a notarized copy of this. Then I'm going to find the original deed, the paper one with the ink from my father's signature. And after that, I smiled, I'm going to remind Charlotte what happens when she tries to rewrite history that isn't hers. Frances left without another word, but her hand brushed mine when she took the document. And it was shaking. Another crack in the board, another piece ready to fall. As the sun lowered over the pine tree, I stood under its branches, staring at the initials again. I wasn't just fighting for my right to hang a light bulb or fix a gutter. I was fighting to keep this place mine. By the next morning, I had a plan. I needed one more document. The original deed. Not the scanned version, not the photocopy. The real thing. Signed in my dad's old handwriting, back when the county recorded land with ink and leather books. I knew where it had to be, the basement. Now let me say this, our basement wasn't one of those HGTV renovated walk-ins with recessed lighting and labeled bins. Ours was cement, dust, and wood shelves warped from time and moisture. The kind of place where you duck your head instinctively, even if the ceiling's high enough. Where the light switch only worked half the time and the hum of the water heater echoed like someone breathing just behind you. But I wasn't going down there for comfort, I was going for truth. I clicked on the overhead bulb. It flickered like a nervous eye, then glowed steady. The boxes were all where Mom had left them before she passed, most marked in her neat cursive. Photos, receipts, Dad's tools, and a taped-up one that just said, Deeds. I pulled it down, dust clouded up, scratching my throat. Inside, folders, rubber-banded papers, even an old city map with hand-drawn lot lines. The bulb overhead dimmed for a second. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make the shadows shift. I narrowed my eyes. Not today, I muttered. One folder was thicker than the rest, and when I opened it, the smell hit me first. Aged paper and mothballs, sharp as memory. Inside, there it was. Deed, 3389A, dated 1978, signed by Harold and Elaine Carter. Beneath it was the amendment from 1986. Legacy protection filed and recorded. And better yet, Mom had underlined the phrase non-negotiable upon future HOA acquisition. I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, because it was proof Charlotte couldn't erase, not legally, not without committing fraud. A sound from upstairs stopped me cold. Footsteps. But not boots, not heavy, not Mason. Soft. Quick. I froze, waited, nothing. After a few seconds, I moved slow, slipping the deed and amendment into a folder and tucking it under my sweater. I took the stairs 2 at a time, quiet as I could. No one was inside. But the porch door, locked every night, was open just a crack. I stepped outside, scanned the yard. Nothing, just wind and leaves and that damn camera blinking on the pole. I shut the door, bolted it, and leaned against it for a beat. Back at the table, I smoothed out the deed. There, in Dad's looping signature, was the line I needed to see. For the Carter family, permanent residence and guardianship of this land. I traced it with my thumb. That night, I called Mason. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice low, radio chatter in the background. "Someone was in the house," I said. Silence. "You sure?" I didn't imagine it. Back door was cracked. Nothing's missing, but it wasn't locked from the inside. He sighed. Want me to come by after shift? No, just tell me, can I install a private camera system under the county's latest code? Exterior, non-invasive. Completely legal, he said. Want me to drop off the spare rig? Already have it. Just needed you to say it. Before we hung up, he added, if this is what it feels like now, Mom, you need to be careful. I am, I said. Careful's the only way to win. I stayed up till 2 a.m. backing up everything. Documents, photos of the deed, scanned amendments. I didn't just store them digitally, I printed duplicates, stuffed them in envelopes and labeled them with, in case of emergency, deliver to media. By morning, I felt lighter, but sharper, too. Like something had shifted. I didn't just have defenses now, I had ammunition. I stood on the porch just after sunrise, coffee in hand, watching the pine tree sway against the dull gray sky. That tree had outlived both my parents. Outlived more than a few HOA presidents, too. It stood because it belonged here, not because it asked permission. It was the same tree Dad carved our initials into when I was 10. He held my wrist steady, made me trace the lines, made me feel what permanence meant. It was the same tree they'd flagged for excess organic debris 2 months ago. I walked over and pressed my hand against the bark. Let him try, I whispered. Inside, the folder sat on the table where I'd left it. Deed, amendment, backup copies. But I knew it wasn't safe there anymore. Not after last night. I had a fireproof lockbox in the closet, but even that felt too obvious now. Instead, I pulled up a loose floorboard under the hallway rug. Beneath it, Dad's old ammo tin still sat tucked in the corner. Dry, sealed, untouched since he passed. I slipped the documents inside and sealed it shut. If they wanted to take this house from me, they'd have to tear it up board by board. Around noon, Frances returned. She didn't knock, just stood there at the edge of the walkway like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I stepped outside. Charlotte called an emergency board meeting, she said. Tonight, 6 p.m., closed door. What's on the agenda? Review of member rights and emergency article revisions, she recited. I raised an eyebrow. Emergency? Frances nodded. She said it's a protective measure against non-compliant residents who threaten neighborhood morale. I laughed, short and dry. You mean me? She didn't answer, just opened her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. I wasn't supposed to take this, but you need to see it. Inside was a printout, minutes from the last board meeting, near the bottom, in bold. Discussed potential expulsion of Evelyn Carter under Article 7B, member behavior detrimental to association unity. Detrimental? I asked, folding it shut. For keeping my house? She's planning something, Frances said, voice low. I don't think it's just a vote. Gary mentioned law enforcement, liability insurance. They're trying to make me snap, I said, push me into doing something they can use. Frances nodded. You ever think she's scared of you? I asked her. Why would she be? Because you remember who this place belonged to before it was manicured within an inch of its soul. Frances cracked a smile. Barely, but it was there. That evening I walked out to the tree again, notebook tucked under my arm. I flipped through the pages. Every violation, date, photo, voice message, and conversation logged. I had a timeline now, a full record. And pinned to the last page, a printout of the legacy clause. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me, turned. Derek, he looked. Tired, jaw clenched, tie undone, holding a USB drive in one hand like it weighed too much. He didn't speak, just handed it to me. What is it? I asked. Ours, he said. Charlotte's call with the district manager. She wants a forced legal review of your deed, not through the HOA, through a private firm she's friends with. Illegal? I asked. Shady as hell, he replied. And she's been trying to fast-track it before anyone can challenge the motion publicly. I stared at the drive for a long second. You recording meetings now? He didn't answer, just gave a slow nod and walked away. Back inside, I uploaded the audio to 3 separate folders, one to my cloud, one on Mason's encrypted drive, one burned to a disk I tucked behind the pantry door with the home insurance files. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was war, and I'd already planted my flag. If you've ever had to defend what's yours from people hiding behind rules, you're not alone. Let me know where you're watching from and stick around. Charlotte's about to learn how badly she underestimated the quiet ones. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Not after hearing Charlotte's voice on that recording, slick and smug, describing how to dismantle my family's legacy with discretion. She was trying to sneak around the law and get my deed invalidated by some backdoor legal firm she had connections with. It was time to push back. No more logging violations and hoping the rules would protect me. She wasn't playing by the rules, and I wasn't going to sit still and let her rewrite the terms of the fight. The next morning, I drove out to Mason's place, not because I didn't trust him. I did, but because this part had to be done off-grid. The fewer ears, the better. He met me in the driveway, a thermal mug in one hand and a toolbox in the other. "You ready?" he asked, eyeing the fire in my posture. "I was born ready," I said, then added with a smirk, "You know what I mean." We set up 2 audio-translated cameras, one hidden in the porch light fixture, the other inside the planter box near the walkway. Motion sensors, too. All of it routed through Mason's secure local network, not the cloud. Charlotte had her eyes everywhere, but I doubted she'd sniff out anything running offline. By noon, I was back at home organizing the documents when the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor first. It was Frances. She looked different, less nervous. Her hand still trembled a little, but there was something steadier in her eyes, like she'd crossed some internal line and couldn't go back now. "I need to show you something," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. "This isn't from me," she said, almost whispering. "It's from Derek. He couldn't bring himself to hand it to you directly." "What is it?" "Security footage," she said, "from the HOA office, 2 weeks ago." I plugged it in. The file was labeled Camera 2 Side Storage, 3:13 p.m. I hit play. There she was, Charlotte, alone in the back storage room. She unlocked a cabinet, flipped through a file drawer, and then she shredded something. No hesitation, clean, practiced. Next frame, Gary walked in, glanced around, then handed her a folder. Frances whispered, "That was your amended deed copy." Derek recognized the folder. "He saw it on your last file request." I froze. "You destroyed official HOA records?" She called it a disruption minimizer, said if it wasn't in their system, they couldn't be held accountable. I looked up. "She told you that?" She didn't know I was still in the room. Frances sat down then, slowly, like the weight had finally caught up to her. "I joined the board because I thought I could help keep things fair," she said, voice low. "But all I do is deliver lies and seal envelopes. I thought if I stayed neutral, I'd stay safe. But watching her do that, watching you fight alone, it stopped being neutral. It became cowardice." Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back fast. "Well now?" I asked. She met my gaze. "Because my dad helped build that treehouse out back when we were kids. And when she started calling it a nuisance structure, I realized she doesn't care about this place. Not the history, not the people, just control." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "It's not too late to do the right thing." "I already have," she said, standing. "Derek said if you want to shut this down permanently, you need to be at the county archives by tomorrow morning. There's one more file, one she hasn't touched yet." "What is it?" "Survey records, boundary definitions from before the HOA redrew the map lines. If yours match the original deed, her case falls apart." I nodded. "Tell Derek I'll be there." "And Evelyn," she said, pausing at the door. "I'm done delivering her messages." She left with her back straight, steps firm. And just like that, the second domino fell. The next morning, I left before the sun could finish rising. No makeup, no coffee, just a folder, a flash drive, and the quiet hum of a plan I wasn't letting go of. The county archive building sat on a hill like it didn't belong to the present. Stone steps, green copper overhang, and records dating back before electricity ran through our street. It smelled like paper and varnish and the kind of dust that came from disuse, not neglect. The clerk behind the counter looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, but her eyes lit up when I said the word survey maps. You want historical or municipal overlay? Original boundary surveys, I said. Pre-HOA rezone. Parcel 3389A. She whistled. Old school, one sec. She disappeared through a swinging door. I took a breath and sat in the vinyl chair against the wall, watching the strip of sunlight crawl across the tile. My leg bounced. It wasn't nerves, it was anticipation. When she came back, she had a leather-bound folder in her hands and a white-gloved intern trailing behind her like it was the Constitution. She placed it on the table in front of me. There you go, be careful with the corners. Inside were parchment-thin records, hand-drawn grids, initialed with county seals and ink smudges. But I didn't need to flip far. The 5th page showed everything I needed. Lot 3389, A, outlined in red ink. With the boundary line that extended 8 feet past the fence the HOA installed 6 years ago. I smiled. My front walkway? My old shed? That pine tree? All mine, legally, historically, permanently. I took high-res photos, then asked for certified copies. The clerk printed them slowly, like she knew the weight behind each inch of paper. I paid the fee, signed the release, and walked out into the morning air like I'd just snuck gold out of a vault. Back at home, Mason was already in the driveway. You went dark for 2 hours, he said, arms crossed. I was 5 minutes from driving over there. I handed him the survey copies. Want to see something that'll make your legal heart skip a beat? He unfolded them on the hood of his car. His eyebrows shot up. This redraw, it means... Maley carved my line illegally. Everything past that fence is mine again. He looked at me. How fast can you get this notarized and filed? Already scheduled, and I backed it all up. Damn, he said, half laughing. You're really doing this. I'm not stopping until she's disarmed. Before I could speak again, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think paper will save you? You forgot who writes the rules. I stared at it, thumb hovering over reply, then locked the screen. She was watching. Charlotte? Mason asked, already guessing. She's lashing out. She knows I'm close. Mason stepped forward, voice low. She's crossed a line. If she's using burner numbers and deleting HOA records, we can call the sheriff. I shook my head. Not yet. We let her dig her own grave first. Then we bring everyone to watch the burial. He nodded. How? We set the bait. She wants a reaction? Let's give her one. That afternoon I went for a walk around the neighborhood. Casual, public, deliberate. I waved to neighbors, paused near the HOA office trailer, took out my phone and filmed a slow panoramic shot of the street, the lot lines, the trees. Let her see me being unbothered. Let her wonder what I had in my pocket. I didn't have to throw the first punch. I just had to show I could take one without flinching. That night, Mason and I watched the porch cam footage together. 9:03 p.m., movement detected. A figure in a blazer stepped up onto the porch, checked the windows, then bent down to the planter. Trying to find the camera, maybe, or trying to plant something else. Either way, she didn't see what was behind her, the second camera. We got her, I said. Mason leaned back, grinning. We're not just building a case anymore, he said. We're setting a trap. The next morning, something had shifted in the air, and not in that vague, poetic sense. I mean, people were looking at me differently. When I walked past the Johnsons on my way to the mailbox, Harold actually nodded. He hadn't acknowledged me since the HOA fined me for my mailbox paint chipping. Across the street, a kid was riding his bike over the sidewalk chalk I'd drawn the night before, marking the true property line. His mom didn't yank him away. Didn't scowl. Just watched me from the porch, eyes squinting like she was trying to figure out how long I'd known. The trap had started to work, and I hadn't even sprung it yet. Mason was already parked at the curb when I got back inside. He waved a to-go coffee in the air like a flag of war. Fee moved the planter, he said, stepping in, and now she's filing an injunction. I blinked. Already? She's trying to make it look like you're disturbing the peace. She's framing your cameras as a neighborhood privacy threat. But she's sloppy. She filed it as a Class 2, which doesn't hold if the property lines are disputed. She's panicking, I said. Good. Still, he added, setting the coffee down, we'll need a counter. Something clean, something public. My phone buzzed again. No name, just a number. If you keep dragging this out, Evelyn, people will see who you really are. I stared at it for a second, thumb hovering over the screen, then hit record and read the message aloud, word for word. Mason raised an eyebrow. Documented. At noon, I got the call from Frances. She's scheduled a vote for tomorrow night, she said. Board only, no residents, but the agenda leaked. What's the item? Emergency censure and forced removal of a disruptive homeowner. I sat down slowly, absorbing the words. She's calling a vote to evict me. She's trying, Frances whispered, but there's a crack in the board now. I heard Gary arguing with her in the parking lot, something about not going down for her. And Derek? Silent, but he shows up to every meeting now. Every time she speaks, he's watching the tape recorder like it might explode. I smiled. We just need the right spark. That night, I pulled out the memory card from the porch camera and reviewed the footage again. Charlotte had stepped onto my property. At night, without notice, then sent me a threatening message. She didn't know she'd been caught from 2 angles, audio and visual. And she definitely didn't know Frances had already confirmed she shredded the original deed file. The folder was thick now, records, audio logs, printed threats, boundary surveys. I added the latest clip, labeled it, then handed it to Mason. This all goes to the sheriff's office tomorrow morning, anonymous drop, no signature. What about the HOA vote? We'll be there, just not to speak. I spent the next few hours drafting a flyer. Not a protest, not a smear campaign, just a single piece of paper with bold type, laid out like a press release. What happens when your HOA violates the law? Come see for yourself, Thursday, 6 p.m., HOA office. This meeting is not closed, it is yours. Below that, just 2 images, the county survey and a still from Charlotte standing on my porch. I printed 40 copies. Before dawn, I walked the entire block and tucked them into mailboxes, folded just right, edge peeking out. No shouting, no threats, just truth. That day, the silence in the neighborhood cracked wide open. Mrs. Bennett waved me over and asked if I'd help her review her own deed. The Grays gave me a thumbs up from their truck. Even the boy with the skateboard slowed down and asked, "You really gonna make 'em pay?" "Not me," I said. "The rules they love so much, they're gonna do it for me." And I meant it. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. If you've ever watched someone twist the rules to bully a whole neighborhood, this one's for you. Drop your city in the comments and stay close. Tomorrow night's the vote, and Charlotte won't see what's coming. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. By 5:15, the parking lot was already full. And not with the usual suspects, the whispery, clipboard-wielding regulars who treated every gathering like a private club. No, this time it was the folks I'd seen grow quieter over the years. The dads with dusty boots, the moms who stopped coming to meetings after being scolded for letting their kids chalk the sidewalks. Even Mrs. Kellerman showed up. Walker and all. Mason stood by the utility pole across the street, arms folded, keeping an eye on the porch cams remotely. He gave me a small nod as I passed, just a quiet, "You ready?" in his eyes. "Let's find out," I muttered. Inside the community hall, Charlotte was already at the table. Her lipstick was a touch too sharp, her posture was military tight. The other board members flanked her like furniture, silent, arranged. Frances sat off to the side, not on the dais. I noticed that immediately. There was a sign on the wall. "Due to board sensitivity, public comment will be limited." Didn't matter. I wasn't here to ask permission. Charlotte cleared her throat and tapped the mic. "Thank you all for coming. As always, tonight's meeting is guided by structure and procedure." Someone behind me coughed, loud and sarcastic. She hesitated just a flicker, then forced a smile. "Before we begin, we'll address item A on the agenda, emergency vote regarding continued disruptions on lot 3389. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. I raised my hand. "Point of order, this vote's illegal." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I stepped forward and pulled out the certified survey, the notarized copies, and, just for good measure, the flash drive with her porch footage. This document shows the HOA's boundary redraw violated county zoning lines, and here's the footage of you trespassing to investigate my cameras without notice, along with a voice message that reads more like a threat than a code enforcement concern. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Another, "She went on her porch?" Charlotte's fingers curled around the edge of the table. That footage is doctored. Mason stepped through the back door at that exact moment. Actually, it's double-backed on a private server and a timestamp match motion log. Want me to pull it up live? A few neighbors clapped, real claps, not polite ones. Gary leaned forward on the board table, jaw tight. I didn't authorize that boundary change, he said, voice flat. Charlotte shot him a look that could have melted steel. We discussed it. Last fall. You discussed it, he said. I was on paternity leave. Frances stood up slowly. Her voice didn't waver this time. There was no official vote logged for that change. I searched all archived minutes. Someone near the back muttered, "This is a mess." Derek looked like he wanted to sink into the carpet. Charlotte banged the gavel. "This meeting is out of order." "No," I said, calm but clear. "This is exactly the order. You tried to weaponize process against residents who don't roll over. You tampered with records, stepped over legal boundaries, and treated this HOA like your personal kingdom." People started standing, not yelling, just standing. Quiet, steady. Charlotte looked around, suddenly realizing she wasn't behind the desk anymore. She was in the middle of the room. The authority she used to wear like perfume had evaporated. The crowd didn't fear her anymore. Mason stepped beside me. "Sheriff's Department has everything. We gave them the drive this morning. They'll confirm chain of evidence. You'll be hearing from them soon." She opened her mouth, closed it, sat down. For the first time since this started, she looked small. I turned to the board. "I'm not asking for revenge, just accountability. For me, for the ones who stopped coming. For the kid who got fined for painting a birdhouse." Gary looked at Derek, then nodded. "I motioned to suspend all actions against Evelyn pending legal review," he said. Derek's hand went up. Frances followed, then a fourth. 4 out of 7. The majority. Charlotte didn't even try to gavel it down. I thought I'd feel more triumphant. But walking out of that community hall felt less like a victory parade and more like coming up for air after being held under too long. The sunset was low and heavy, casting long shadows over the pavement. Mason walked a few steps behind me, phone still buzzing with texts from neighbors and emails from folks asking for copies of the footage. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, but I didn't stop. Just tired. Expected. He didn't press. Across the street, someone slow clapped. It was Harold. Mr. I don't get involved, leaning against his truck with his arms crossed. "Never thought I'd see the day," he called. "You and me both," I muttered. Word had spread fast. The meeting footage was already circulating. One of the teens posted a reel titled, "HOA Queen Gets Dethroned Live," and tagged it with a freeze frame of Charlotte's face mid-shock. It had 3,000 views by the time we got home. But it wasn't just schadenfreude. It was the shift. That next morning, Frances showed up at my doorstep with a plastic folder. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept, but her jaw was set. "Jem submitted a resignation letter at 2:18 a.m., she said. "Emailed the whole board." My eyebrows shot up. "She's gone?" "Well, technically she's stepping down, pending personal reevaluation," Frances said. "But it's coded language. She won't be back." I invited her inside. Mason handed her a mug of coffee without a word. It felt normal, like she belonged there now. "She's erased a lot," Frances said quietly. "Deleted meeting minutes, digital records, some things, they're just gone. But Derek's willing to testify, says he saw her do it on multiple occasions." I nodded. "We'll rebuild it, piece by piece." We sat in silence for a few moments before she added, "I don't think I would have had the courage if you hadn't just kept showing up." That landed deeper than she meant it to. Because for weeks, that's all I'd done. Show up, even when I was tired, even when it was easier to ignore. I kept walking my line, kept planting that flag. And now they were watching too. That afternoon, Mason and I met with a local attorney who specialized in HOA reform cases. She flipped through our file, thick now, with statements, photos, records, timestamps, and looked up with a smirk. "This isn't just a civil defense," she said. "This is grounds for a countersuit." "Against her?" I asked. "And the board, if you want. Depends how far you're willing to take it." I looked at Mason. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. We left the law office with options. real ones, legal, public, and stacked in our favor. But the biggest shift came the following Saturday. The HOA bulletin board, usually a sea of dense printouts about fines and community rules, had something new pinned to it. A hand-painted sign with cursive letters on top and bold print underneath. Let's talk, resident round table, Saturday at 4 p.m., under the pavilion. No official logo, no mandatory attendance, just neighbors inviting each other to speak. I stood in front of it longer than I should have, just staring. Crazy, huh? A voice said from behind me. I turned, it was Gary. No gavel? I asked. He chuckled. I'm retiring after this term, but I figured I could help change how it ends. You were quiet for a long time. I was scared for a long time, he said. Didn't mean I liked what was happening. I appreciated the honesty. That mattered more than a perfect record. Later that evening I walked out to the tree again. The pine, the one that marked my true property line. The survey stake still sat beside it. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I had to guard it. I sat under it instead, leaned back against the bark, and looked up through the branches. A breeze moved through the needles, soft and slow, not dramatic, not poetic, just peaceful. The sun cut through the needles overhead, dappling the pine bark with warm gold. I stayed there longer than I meant to, but it didn't feel wasted. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't bracing for the next letter, next notice, next knock at the door. This wasn't just about the tree anymore. It never had been. It was about control, about power masquerading as procedure. And I had stopped it, with evidence, resilience, and ironically, the same rules they used to corner me. That following week, I got a certified envelope in the mail. It was from the county. At first, my heart kicked hard, muscle memory, but when I opened it, I smiled. The zoning department had formally reinstated the original boundary records for our block. Reversal due to improper HOA interference, it read. They'd also issued a warning to the association. Further violations would come with fines. I tucked the letter into the same file I'd kept everything in. My son saw me from the hallway and gave a little smirk. You framing that one too? Maybe, I said. Might hang it next to Charlotte's resignation. He laughed. A real one. Not the tired, I'm just here to help laugh he'd given in the beginning. I still can't believe she called 911 on you because her key didn't work. I can. I paused, then added, she was never mad about the lock. She was mad about the door. What do you mean? She thought she could walk through anything. He leaned on the doorframe. Not anymore. The following Saturday, the round table meeting at the pavilion started just after 4. No mics, no gavel, just plastic chairs, folding tables, and a coffee urn someone had dragged out from the rec room. Francis stood beside me and introduced the session, not with a speech, just a soft, let's talk, and stepped back. And people did. They talked. About fines that didn't make sense, rules that were enforced unevenly, and more importantly, ideas to rebuild trust. Real ideas. Like shared decision logs, rotating community liaisons, and quarterly open audits. It wasn't a revolution, but it was different. And better. As folks filtered out, Harold approached me with something wrapped in an old flannel rag. Found it behind my tool bench. Figured you should have it. He unwrapped it carefully. An old brass survey compass. Faded initials etched into the back. E.H. My breath caught. That was my father's. And gave it to my brother in 91, Harold said, voice soft. Said, always check your lines yourself. People lie. Land doesn't. I couldn't speak for a second. I just nodded and held it like it might vanish. After everyone left, I walked back to the pine tree one more time. The wind had picked up, soft but constant. I buried the compass near its base, not out of sentiment, but out of respect. Because this land was his. And now, finally, it was mine again. Not on paper, but in peace. I stood there for a long while, watching the light shift between the branches. Eventually, Mason joined me, a thermos in his hand. You know this isn't over, right? He said. I know. You'll try again, sooner or later. Then I'll be ready. He handed me the thermos. You've earned that. I took a sip. Coffee, strong and hot. I looked around at the quiet street, the homes, the porch light starting to flicker on. This place means something, I said, not because of the rules, but because of the people willing to protect it from the ones who twist them. Mason nodded. Well said. Legacy isn't just what you inherit, it's what you fight to protect. If you've ever stood up to an HOA, seen your community push too far, or just want to take your neighborhood back, drop your story below. Tell me where you're watching from. Because you're not alone, and we're not done yet.